It's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call the Public Works meeting to order. Betsy, would you be willing to do a roll call, please?
Yes. Mr. Temperley?
Here.
Mr. Pickard?
Here.
Mr. Lair?
Here.
Ms. Schmidt?
All right, that brings us to the correction or approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which was on August 14th.
Motion to approve. I'll second that motion.
Did we do a roll call vote for this one?
Usually we do, yeah.
No, usually we do, all those in favor say aye, don't
Usually,
you can do it either
But you
way.
can do a roll call in case somebody wants to.
We'll do a roll call vote, because that's what I remember doing.
Okay.
Mr. Temperley?
Aye.
Mr. Pickard?
Aye.
Mr. Lair?
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Motion passed 4-0.
So that brings us to questions and public comment. See a whole lot of empty chairs, so that brings us to item number 5 for budgets for 2019, starting off with streets.
Okay.
I also announced that weekend, so I'm sorry, it's going to get only worse.
That's excellent. I like it. Okay, well, we're going to go through streets, wastewater, water, and electric tonight. We'll handle them separately. And just a couple of quick opening comments. I don't have a lot of notes on them, and so I didn't plan on going through them page by page, unless you want to, of course. And maybe the overall comment is, given the activity on South Main and Mulberry for next year, there's really not a whole lot other stuff going on. There's a couple of things that we'll highlight as we'll go through here, but certainly it's going to be a pretty active year anyway. But from a budget standpoint, there's really not a lot of room to do a whole heck of a lot. And then the other comment I'll make before we get into it is that the budget that you got in your budget packet is different than what's as of today, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, is that there were some updates, and they have mainly to do with state aids and levy limits and you know, kind of actually plugging in real numbers in that regard. It affects only the street budget, and instead of pulling that out now, I'll mention it as we get into the budget where that affects the street budgets the most, but it's just one spot, and it's simply a matter of moving some money, but again, I'll explain that. And so if it's all right with you, we'll kind of jump into this thing.
I just had one question.
Please,
If I
yes.
read this right, the salaries went down?
Yeah, why don't we start right there?
Yeah.
That was my first question.
Yeah.
I've decided to work for free. I'm kidding.
Noted.
Let me step back here. Let me stop being so flip. Yes, salaries went down for two reasons, actually. One is that we've had 2 retirements last year, and the two spots were filled, but of course they're filled at a much lower cost. And the other reason,
The fringe benefit, does that do with the insurance I saw in the paper? Or
yes.
is that, okay.
Thank you, and that's where I was going to go, is that there's some difference in cost in the insurance, but the wage itself, I believe the average or the cost that's figured in is 1.5%. Is that right, Betsy?
Yes.
But again, and you'll see that also in the electric budget, that because of some other changes, you won't necessarily see from year to year the total salaries being the same. And again, in the streets, it's because 2 retirements, 2 replacements at a lower cost. Okay. So that actually was the very first one. That was on page 175. And then I'm going to jump to page 182 in that same streets budget. And again, stop me if there's other places you want to ask questions or make comments.
It looks like the trees, the Christmas tree breakout is new. What was the purpose for adding that?
Yeah, that's all part of, Steve putting together a little bit more of an organizational chart, identifying duties.
Okay.
The other thing that's going to go along with that are, all of the goals and objectives and the plans and everything. And so this is the beginning of doing that. It's all really part of getting more data into our budget so that we're budgeting with data and not seat of the pants type stuff.
It was nice to see. I was just curious what the real rationale was. So thank you.
Yeah, more visible, more visual, yep. Okay,
R182 is snow removal.
Yes.
Is that the correct page?
yes.
Okay.
And that one's a little bit difficult to budget, of course, because we're not sure. We're hoping that because of all the rain, there'll be no snow this season. I'm not counting on that. It could go the exact opposite way. So really, in that regard, we kind of budget the same. And the only other comment I want to make in this one specifically is that, of course, we've got 7 guys on the street crew that do the bulk of the plowing, but as the city is growing, getting more streets, et cetera, we're tapping into other departments. And I think we've talked about this a little bit in the past, where we actually now have a couple of the guys from the electric department are able to run the bigger snow trucks and stuff, and so there's a lot of cross work there, and it works out really well. And then in regard to 182, I'm going to kind of jump to 197 because that's where we actually have the cost of the salt. So I don't mean to confuse you, but when we look at salt, and I want to make a couple of points here, even though the price per ton of salt continues to go up, we are purchasing less salt. And we're doing that because we're pre-wetting our salt, and this season, we're planning on doing more of what's called brining or de-icing, where we put down the pure liquid solution prior to a snow event. And the idea, of course, there is that it keeps the snow from sticking to the street. It ultimately results in hopefully less plowing, but more or less snow sticking on the streets, safer streets, et cetera, less time plowing. Less cost, because typically we can do this brining during regular working hours as opposed to overtime and that sort of thing. So this really will be the first season that we get into the full de-icing, is what this particular approach is called.
But we've been brining for a while on a trial basis?
We've been pre-wetting. We have never really brined.
Oh.
The county has, and we have access to brine through them, but we have never been able to put down the absolute 100% wet solution. We've only been wetting the salt as it comes out of the spreaders up to this point. Yeah, there's a subtle difference. You understand what I'm saying, though?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the one where we can do it up to 7 days prior to the storm. With the pre-wetting that we're doing now, it's just a brine solution that sprays on the salt as it comes out of the spinner on the truck. The idea there is to begin the melting right away. It keeps the salt from bouncing off the street as much, that sort of thing. So we've seen some savings doing that, and we're anticipating more savings by going to the brine.
And so have you tried brining at all?
Not on our streets, no. This is a test. We bought an old truck, and we're putting a tank on the back, and we're going to see how it goes. We're kind of going with the county, some of the experience they've had. They're helping us to calibrate our equipment and so on and so forth, so, yeah.
I've heard a lot of good things about doing the brining as well, so I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, and we anticipate too, it'll be mainly the main streets that we'll be doing. It won't be like we're going to try to hit every street, but the heavy thoroughfares and that sort of thing. And we'll keep pretty good records as to how things go and how much we put down and that sort of thing.
Is that like the priority 1 streets then that you guys talk about, or is there a different grouping that you're thinking of?
Well, it'll be our main thoroughfares. So that's, Main Street, Lake Street, Mulberry, Ferry. I'm missing one, but I can't think of what it is right now.
Madison?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
So those will be the ones that we'll hit first. And we don't know how much time this is going to take, so we're going to start with those, and if we find that we've got time to do more, we'll do more.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a bit of an experiment. Let's see, I just wanted to touch on page 188, which is the yard waste center. I think, as we've discussed, we're kind of status quo for 2019 as we look at some more things there, how we're going to do things 2020 and beyond. But as far as our expenses for this year, we anticipate they'll be similar to what we've done in the past. And then I'm going to move to page 198, and this is the one big change, as I mentioned, in kind of revamping the budget from getting the state aid numbers, et cetera. If you see under equipment, there's a $15,000 expenditure. That's for a new plow for one of our pickups and a floor sweeper for the shop. That has been moved to the capital budget. So we're still going to be purchasing the equipment, but instead of taking it out of the general fund, it goes now into the capital budget.
Is that just numbers? That's just numbers math. It still is from our same overall. It's just a numbers game is really what it comes down to, right?
Well, capital you borrow, and then you pay it off over
I
time.
thought that was the general fund.
No,
No.
The
Is
general
that-
fund.
mostly capital is borrowed now,
Okay.
Yeah,
right? Not every penny, but most
Right.
of it is.
yeah.
Okay.
So the idea, it's not really an expense, like it's equipment that gets amortized.
Right, where most
Yeah.
of the, like the operating costs, that's usually tax
Okay.
Yeah.
with some borrowing.
Now I'm
Sometimes.
Yeah, if we start borrowing
Thank you.
for expenses, that's bad.
Yeah.
That's real
We
big.
don't wanna-
Thank you.
Yeah, but, and so, yeah, it's a subtle change, but it's a real change, it's still real money. And it's an estimate, we'll see what everything comes in at. Well, I'm gonna go to page 233 then in this budget, and there's a number of items on that page that we'll look at. Of course, in 2019, we've got far less street maintenance.
You said 233? You said
233, yeah, it should be
Mine
headed.
doesn't go to 233.
No,
Oh, doesn't it?
Is it,
Mine, 202 is the last page
is
I've
it the
got.
capital one?
Oh, it's in the
Yes.
capital budget,
Oh,
I'm so
okay.
sorry.
All right.
Yep. Have you found it, do you know where I'm at yet?
I'm there now.
It's capital, general government, capital improvement program, public works streets, page 233.
Or for us, it's the capital budget,
Oh.
2019.
All right,
You got the hard copy, we got the
I do.
hard.
So it'll be your third tab
Yeah,
down and then several pages in.
yeah.
Which page?
5 pages in.
233 is on the bottom.
Got it.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No,
I-
we're catching up.
yeah.
Well, I organize this a little different so I can keep things straight. Okay, so again, a number of things on this particular page. Starting right at the top, you notice signs, we had 12,000 budgeted for this year and nothing for next year. We budgeted a higher amount this year because we have to begin replacing our street name signs. Well, we've got quite a few of those done. Now, we do have a budget for signs in another area, much lower, it's just our replacement fund, but we should be able to carry through for 2019 just because there's so many other expenses there. You'll notice the dramatic difference in street maintenance from 1.4 million to 100,000. And even that is quite a bit, but we still have patches, et cetera, that we're going to have to do in 2019. And then the other point I want to make on that line is you'll notice then that in 2020, 21, we do not go up as high as we had previously. We just aren't sure that we can manage all the repairs and stuff that come with 1.4 million. So we're kind of lowering the amount that we'll be doing. Go ahead, jump in anytime you want, Dwayne.
And another reason that we're lowering that number, at least for the short term in the 2020, 21, what we're finding, excuse me, what we're finding in the analysis as we're continuing to improve these streets, what we're running into is some of the streets that require maintenance are now having underground utilities that require replacement. And so finding streets that meet the maintenance program requirements, but also have utilities underneath that are in good enough shape to warrant paving over the top of them, that list is starting to shrink. And so in conjunction with what Paul said, we're looking at least in the short term in 2020 to lower that number. But let's keep in mind that the analysis we did 2 years ago did say that we should be in the 800 to 1.5 million per year to keep the program going. What we're running into a little problem is keeping utility facilities up to speed and keeping those budgets under control at the same time. So I think in 20 we'll know a little more. Actually in 19 we'll start putting together 20's program. So we'll have some information next spring, probably for 20, for that 500,000 that's there.
So if we don't spend that extra money, where does it end up going?
The,
You mean any project
Yeah.
dollars?
Well, like if in 2020 and 21, we're, say, 5 or 600,000 less than, because we're waiting for the rest of the utilities underneath to catch up, does that money still exist, or it's not I'm just making sure we don't lose it.
You find some other worthy cause, I assume.
Yeah.
Well, if we borrow it, we have to use it for the purpose that we borrowed it for, so we're very restricted that way. If we get to that, like in 19, when he's doing the 20 budget and it's determined that there isn't a street that we're gonna be able to do, he's not going to put it in the budget, he's gonna remove it and,
We're just not gonna borrow the money then.
right,
Correct.
right,
So was this money borrowed that we did for this last year?
yeah,
The 1.4 million?
yeah, that was
Yes,
part of our borrowing.
and correct, Betsy, if the dollars, it goes to debt, if there are dollars left over.
Borrowed dollars that are not used for the purpose that they're designed need to be used to offset debt.
Okay.
So Todd, we were borrowing for expenses.
Well, no,
Street maintenance,
well, there's a lifespan, right? I don't know. You could argue either way.
Yes.
I mean,
It's capital.
it's capital, yeah.
It's your definition of expense. A capital improvement
Yeah.
is an expense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we're rebuilding the same street each year, then you would be an expense, but these repairs should last 5 to 10 years.
Right, and
how long is the streets seal coat supposed to last?
So the seal coat is in that 7-year range, or at least that's the program we're running. In the mill and overlay or pulverize, the program we're running right now would be in the 20 to 30-year range. Assuming that you're doing the chip seal program at a 7-year return as well. So in that 1.4, some of it is chip seal, but a large amount, at least in this year's program, a large amount of that dollars are in a pulverization and mill and overlay program, which should be providing upwards of 20 years of life extension to the streets that are being pulverized and milled and overlaid.
I don't want to dwell on it too much, but I'm just thinking out loud. So once we start getting up to speed and the underground utilities are back up, then our maintenance catches back up, and then we start going back to that 800 to 1.4 to maintain the streets to where they're at.
Correct.
Okay.
And so I think there's some analysis that will be done in 20. And rather, we just held that 500 to 600,000 throughout 20, 21, 22, 23, with the assumption that as we're doing planning in 19, as with all of our capital improvement plans, it's really a projection that's a moving, kind of a dynamic document, that when we get out 4 or 5 years, there will be some streets that, as you know, in our last meeting, we talked about candidate streets that are rated 3 and below. And if you recall from 2 months ago, that list was rather large in comparison to the 5-year capital plan. And there are a number of those streets that will require attention, even though the utilities below need replacement.
Yeah, I think you'll see when we get into the water budget that it might be a while.
It was noticeable.
Yeah, so I wouldn't hold your breath on that one, but, we're working toward it, so. But we'll discuss that one more in just a little bit here. Let's see, a couple other things on this particular page. I just want to note that, throughout the budget, you're going to see costs for Highway 89 and Mulberry Street. Understand that the numbers that are in these pieces of paper are estimates, and, our estimates and like Strand's estimates might vary, but those numbers mean nothing until we do the bid. And just as an FYI, the bid for 89, and you just told me that, Dwayne, and I forget, is November 13th, and then the bid for Mulberry is January 9th of next year. So when we see those numbers, these will become more live, but I just want you to understand that one. A couple other quick points on here. You'll see under sidewalks, we have nothing budgeted in this particular budget for doing sidewalks. And again, this is part of the slowdown during the year, or during 2019. We do always have $15,000 in our special assessment fund to replace sidewalks, so we will do at least $15,000 worth of sidewalk replacement next year. It's not like we're not going to do anything, but we're not going to budget anything additional. And then the last one that I'll point out on here is under excavator. And you'll see an amount of $40,000 there. Here's what's going on with this, and you'll see this in all of the budgets, every one of streets, wastewater, water, and electric, that we're going together with those departments to purchase what's called a mini excavator. And they're really not that small, but they're not like a big hi-ho. And the reasoning is that we have found that we have a lot of jobs that we can handle with a mini excavator that we're hiring out. And those costs are mounting up, and as we did the analysis, we realized that we could probably purchase an excavator and do the work ourselves, far less expensive than constantly hiring somebody. And the big one that's driving this, of course, is the lead service line stuff. I mean, that really got us talking about every time we get a bill in for digging up a street, we're thinking, man, that's a big part of having our own piece of equipment. So that was the driver. And then as we got to looking at it, we realized that, streets can be using it for storm sewer work that we sometimes hire out to, or we simply don't have a machine large enough. The electric department, we had debated about getting a new trencher. We have a mini trencher for doing like backyards and that sort of thing, but we didn't have a large trencher, and we realized that maybe we don't have to do that if, again, we can use a mini excavator. And then the same thing with wastewater. There's some work we can do on manholes there. So you'll see this, some amount, it'll vary from department to department based on how much we think each one will be using it, but this is something we're going to try doing ourselves, which we've been talking about for a number of years. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And then actually, under the streets budget, that's all I've got that I want to bring to your attention. Part of the street budgets, of course, are the capital programs, and I think you've got worksheets on all of those too.
That would be tab number 2.
Tab 2, the capital plan. So I don't want to jump away from the streets real quick unless you've got other questions, but as part of that is the whole capital plan and how it affects streets and wastewater and water. So any other questions on the streets budget or comments?
Where was the one for the concession stand for like 1.8 million?
That's in the
Same.
capital budget.
It's on-
You lumped in all the other non-public works projects in there.
Okay,
You talking the one at Sandy Beach?
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
totally different category.
this is the whole city proposed capital budget.
I just wanted to make sure.
No, street department isn't running a concession stand.
Yeah, no thanks.
Yes.
Yeah,
So in that second tab, in the upper right-hand corner, it gives a department.
yeah,
All right,
yeah, look at the department.
I was just going through everything.
Yeah, I saw it.
Start with the
Yeah,
biggest one first.
yeah, but, I realized this is the whole city capital budget.
I will be smarter next year.
Yeah,
Oh, no.
Thank you for giving me all the information.
yeah, because you also have the electric in there.
Yeah.
This is the whole citywide capital,
There's a lot of information in these pages.
yeah,
It was very nice.
yeah.
I enjoyed
No,
reading
yeah,
through it.
no, yeah.
I'm good though. Thank you.
So if we're good there, we'd have Dwayne kind of walk through some of the capital plans. I think you've probably seen those several times. We discussed those separately. Unless, you've got questions, or Dwayne, if you've got other comments that you'd like to make there.
I think what you're referencing is then, as we talked about 2 months ago, the capital improvement plan or your 5-year plan, once South Main and Mulberry are done next year, we're looking at then 2020 just being a maintenance year. 2021 would be West Lake Street. And as you'll see in each of the departments, in the water and the wastewater, there'll be a line item for that street. Then in 22 would be Fremont, and 23 is College Street. Again, those are in the current budget, out those number of years based on the 5-year capital plan that we presented. Again, as this is dynamic in those years, because as we look at those Pacer rating 3 and less candidates, there might be a reason to change 22 or 23 by the time we get to that time frame. Any questions on the numbers that are there, but it's really the numbers that you saw 2 months ago.
It was nice that it was all sounding familiar as I was reading it, so that's good.
Good. And I'll even tell you that a couple of the electric projects like South Main is completed. Mulberry we're only at about 60% there. And they're coming in either close to or under budget, so we're pleased with that. If there's no other questions there, we'll move on to water. The water budget. We'll start with the tough one. See if we can get better. Oh, I'm sorry, actually on your,
We don't have a link for water.
you get I got wastewater next.
Yeah, we got wastewater.
Wastewater. Let's do wastewater next. That's the easiest one. There's absolutely nothing new. I know, it's dull, but we kind of like it that way.
Yep.
The only big thing there is their portion of the excavator. Again, Main Street and Mulberry price or costs are in there. I will just tell you that even though this budget is pretty flat and uneventful, stay tuned. I think we've discussed this also, that there may be DNR requirements coming down the pike that will cause us to make some adjustments at the plant in how we deal with, phosphorus and the temperature of our effluent and all that sort of thing. Looks like, Dwayne, you want to make a comment there?
Maybe you haven't gotten to that page yet, but page 261, one note, Fargo and Reed for 2020, that is a project for 2020 in the wastewater.
Thank you.
If you recall, there was a block of Reed Street from Fargo to Franklin that was to be pulverized this year. In review of the utilities, there is some issues that the treatment plant has experienced with that sanitary sewer. So we canceled the pulverization of that block, and it is currently in the budget for 2020 as a replacement of that sanitary sewer line, a remove and replace. And so you'll see on page 261 of Fargo and Reed with some planning in 2019 and construction in 2020.
Any questions or comments on that one?
I have a question on positions, 259 is an example, where there's a position called utility generalist. I was wondering what that is.
Say it again, Mark, where are you?
Page 259, for example, but any of them that I think goes across utilities.
Yeah, that is, I'm going to use a name, I hope that's okay. It's Sean, he works doing most of our GIS stuff. He was originally, or his position was originally called utility generalist, and then we kind of morphed it into the GIS, and so this is what his costs are to the wastewater, because the maps cross all departments, so that's what that one is. I think you'll see it in some of the other budgets that it's listed as GIS, it just hasn't been changed in this one.
Yeah, I think it's in more than one still.
Yep.
As utility.
Journalist.
And I'll double check that. If we're doubling it up, we'll take it out of here, so I appreciate that. You may have caught one there. Anything else on that one? Okay, now the tough one. Water. I'll try to stay calm. Took an extra blood pressure tablet before I came today. If you look at, I think just for starters on the discussion, if you look at the graph on page 251,
Are we looking at
do you have that?
wastewater?
It's all together.
All together in the utilities
All
budget.
right, 251?
251, you should see a graph there. And the green, red, and blue lines look nice, that's good, but that purple one is our issue. And you'll see it show up in a number of the categories in the budget. that's a combination of things. Without a doubt, the number one is the lead service line replacement costs. And it includes, the cost to dig up our portion, dig up and replace our portion. It's the cost of doing all the additional water sampling that we've had to do in the past, 3-4 years now. I will report some good news on that front. At least our last test for the first 6 months of the year, we passed. And what that means is that we test 40 places every 6 months. And if 4 of them have lead exceedance, then we fail. Well, we only had 1 this last time, and that's good. And that may be due to the fact that we're replacing more lines, and it's getting a little more difficult to find places. But we also know from experience that that could go right down the tubes this next time, because the lead tests can vary so dramatically. But bottom line is we're pleased with how that's going. And the DNR is pleased with how that's going. We report that too. The last meeting we had with them, it wasn't, kumbaya and hugs or anything, but at least, they're recognizing that we're working very hard at this, and this indicates we're spending a lot of money on this thing.
This is 2017, so it doesn't even reflect 2018?
Yet did you look through the budget and you see the cost for 2018?
Well, I'm looking at the lines right now.
Yeah, right. I mean, this is a trend. This is
Yeah,
not.
it keeps going that way.
It keeps going that way, yes. If this was a sales sheet, I'd be out of a job, but thank you for keeping me around. But we're getting better, I guess is what I'm trying to report here, but the costs are just incredible.
So you said we sample 40 every 6 months?
Correct.
And let's say a year or two ago, we were sampling a certain 40. It's always the same 40 if possible, but the worst ones have gotten replacements, I assume, so then you select a different one if that's no longer going to be like one of the worst possible ones, correct?
You're close. You're real close. What happens is the DNR has to approve a site. And so right now we've got 60, I believe about 60 places on the list, and of those 60, we've got to get 40. So it may change slightly from test to test, but the DNR requires that these tests be done at homes where we know there's a lead lateral.
Until you run out of homes.
Until we run out of them.
Right. So right now, we have a list of 60 people, 60 homes with lead lines?
Approximately, correct, yes.
Okay.
And so go ahead.
That are on the test.
That are on the test list.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
As those are replaced, then they go off the test list. And fortunately or unfortunately, we've got about 200 more that we could put back on the list. So, it's a never-ending cycle.
Well, yeah.
But what we're also looking at.
We like to think that there is an end once the lead service lines are 99.9% replaced.
Whole nother topic, Mark. We'll visit that.
Yeah, I know.
But the other point I was going to make is now, in addition to and this will show up also as we go through the water budget, in addition to replacing the lines, we're taking a look at the chemical that we put in to coat the line, to see if we can reduce the amount of lead that's leaching in from lead services and reduce that sample number again.
Yeah.
So the point I want to make, and you're going to see it again, is that we're spending a lot of money in water, mostly on lead service lines. You'll also see that we've got money that we've got to spend now in 2019 and probably 20 on radium, because we found radium in well 4. And then, as I was just alluding to, the chemical that we put into the system to coat the pipes is called corrosion control. And in 2019, we'll be doing a test to determine what is the best mix of chemicals to give us the best corrosion control. So 2019 may not be an expensive year, if you will, but it will set the stage for what we've got to do in subsequent years. So unfortunately, I don't see that line going up soon. I think the trend is there for at least another couple of years, and then hopefully we'll start working out of that. It'll all depend on how intense the EPA and the DNR gets about replacing lead lines. In the work that we've done so far, that our line inspector Brian has done, and he's done a fantastic job of inspecting every home in the city, or at least the homes in the city that we anticipate there could be lead lines. And I believe our number is 300 plus, Dwayne, as a ballpark.
Yes, as a ballpark.
So, I mean, we've replaced about 125, 130, and there's still approximately 300 left. So this could be a lengthy process, especially if the DNR says they all have to go. And based on what we're hearing, both at the DNR and the PSC level, is that they're going to have to go. That's going to be their attitude, that the best way to get rid of lead in the water is to get rid of those lead pipes. So I'm just giving you as full a picture as I can here of what's going to happen in the next few years, at least.
What if the homeowner doesn't want to replace their portion of it?
Yeah, this is,
So why would the city get dinged on if they fail the lead test because they don't want to?
That's the way it is.
yes. Todd, I live in the same world you do. I don't understand that, but they are wielding some pretty heavy power right here, and it's coming from the EPA. You know, it's not just the
Right.
DNR. We were told that they may even start regulating or start requiring us to find out what homes have lead solder, and that we become responsible for that. I mean, this is a huge debate, and obviously we don't want to get into a lot of it now, but the signals we're getting is this is what is going to happen.
You can go into people's homes to look for that then?
Well, we already do for lead service line laterals.
Yeah.
It's all part of a connected system.
Yeah.
You know, it's all a municipal system.
And keep in,
Right, well, I understand that we're responsible for the city side of it.
But yes, I mean, accessing people's home to look for lead solder is a potentiality.
Yeah,
We're not ordered to at this point,
yeah,
but there's, I mean, I don't know how long we want to talk about this, but there are a number of developments that are going on right now. There's communities that are offering new grant programs to encourage residents to replace lead lines.
Yeah.
That's developing right now. I mean, the first one, it came out recently. We've kind of already expended the grant money that we had, and that's not going to be available for us again in the future, but there may be programs that we can set up to address this. I think what you'll see is in the future, when lead laterals are known, the potential that a residence owner is required to replace that prior to a transaction, prior to selling that property to
Right,
the next
yeah.
owner.
Yeah.
I think the private business aspect of that may kind of push some people towards that route. But the fact is that it's very likely we face more mandates, more restriction in the future to address this
right.
issue.
I can see a law passed saying you have to disclose if you
Oh,
have lead
certainly.
pipes. That's
Especially
fair,
once you
that
go-
should be,
and
yeah.
A city going through this process and identifying every lead lateral is going to push that process, absolutely. More than not likely, for sure.
Okay,
This is obviously going to be a topic for future agendas, and I would think
Right.
probably right after the first of the year, we might want to take a close look at where we're at and what's happening and what's not happening, and, yeah, there's a few things that are happening. So, unless you had other questions, we can continue on with this one. Again, I don't have a lot of stuff. We've kind of touched on a number of things here. Page 254, under chemicals, you notice we're staying pretty steady in 2019, but again, we're doing a lot of experimenting, testing, if you will. We anticipate in 2020 that amount will change. It might go up, might go down, but I don't see us staying in the same range there.
on 253, there's both the general list and then third from the bottom is GIS.
Okay, oh, you're right. We'll take a look at that,
And the-
Mark. I didn't notice that.
And the two numbers are a
That's
bit
different,
pretty
yeah.
different too.
Okay, thank you. We'll double check that.
All right.
Good catch.
But the GIS refers to a part-time employee.
It does. Yeah, and this might be a leftover from previous budgets, so
Right,
we'll go
right.
in and
Yep.
make sure that that description is what it's supposed to be.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. All right, let's see. Inventory, or I'm sorry, page 255. Big change there, you'll notice inventory, there's a couple of things going on there. We used to keep some inventory for general repairs like water main breaks, et cetera. We've now gone to more of a just-in-time situation where it's just not worth our while to keep a lot of stuff on the shelf. We purchase as we need it. Because, and I'll probably jinx us here, Dwayne, but because we're not seeing as many water main breaks, but we're seeing more lead service line replacements, we're buying more curb stops and that sort of thing, We're just finding it's too difficult to know even what to keep in inventory. So we simply do it as we need it, and then we can expend it as it happens. But we're just not keeping a lot of stuff on the shelf. And the curb stop and that sort of thing is much cheaper than some of the other things we had. So that's much lower, and we anticipate it'll stay that way. By the way, meters are budgeted at 5,000. That's just typical replacement meters. Keep in mind that we've purchased a number of AMI meters. We did that through loan funds, and so that really is the bulk of our meter budget is in the AMI. You'll see the excavator in there again, and probably the biggest expense on this page, of course, is the water tower. In 2019, we have to inspect and paint that inside and outside. And yeah, so that's really the major expense on this page.
Is that a scheduled thing? The
Yes.
Inspect and paint? It's done every so many years? Or
Yeah.
Especially inspection?
Yeah, inspections on that are every 10 years. The painting, it really is up to us, but if you take a look at it, you realize there's some rust spots on it and that sort of thing. So it's time.
Painting the inside as well, that you said?
Yeah, typically, depending on what they find in the inspection, but even the lower part will be painted as part of, the lower interior will be painted as part of the whole painting project.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this inspection requires.
Draining the whole thing.
Draining the tank.
Oh,
So at that point,
why not, yeah.
Curiosity, what do you do without a water tower?
Well, you send everybody on vacation. No.
No fire for you.
No, then it's picked up by our reservoirs and the pumps there. We have, the tank is 500,000. The water tower, is 500,000, and then our reservoirs, our wells, have a storage capacity of about 700,000. So we work off those. Now, understand, when we draw the tank down, we don't do it for a long time. It's going to be maybe empty for a couple of days,
Yeah,
and then we're able to refill it. That doesn't have to be empty when we do the outside painting. So it's, yeah, and we bring in, one of the big things is maintaining pressure. And so we bring in a company that actually hooks up equipment that maintains our pressure and that sort of thing. The supply is not an issue, the pressure is an issue.
So somebody comes in and adds some pumps or something, or
it'll
rewires
be,
our existing pumps?
it'll be existing pumps, because the well pumps and the booster pumps can pump to,
Right.
they're pumping the water to that
They
elevation.
add a bypass or something?
What they'll actually do is, those pumps will run continuously, so there'll actually be pressure reducing points within the system to relieve that pressure, because the pumps have to continually run. So the pumps are creating that pressure, or what is not there anymore, which is
Right.
that height that's in that tank.
And we've had to do this the last couple of years. We emptied out well 6 and we emptied last year, and we emptied out well 4 this year. So there's equipment that our contractor uses to maintain the pressure. So you shouldn't notice it.
I was just curious. Thank you.
No, I'm not going on the record, Dan. You shouldn't notice it.
Is this the first time we've had to empty out the water tower and paint it?
On purpose.
Yeah, I remember some year we did that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
As long as I've been here, Vicki, I'm sure it hasn't been painted. I think that's still the original paint job on there.
Probably.
Yeah.
I think so.
And that's, we'll mention one of the other issues is what is it to look like when it's done painted? So
Have a pole.
we'll see how that debate goes.
My concern is
Yeah,
the
put a
integrity of the
pole.
water tower.
Thank you.
What rainbow color?
Some other people have,
Very welcome.
yeah. We'll see how that goes. I'm sorry, and there were 2 other things I want to mention on here. You'll see under well 4 radium, we've got a number there that's a placeholder. That really kind of is a worst-case scenario. It could be considerably less, and we're hoping for that. Tests are still going on, so we don't know exactly what we're going to have to do to mitigate that, but we wanted to make sure there was some money there for that. And the one I was just talking about, the LSL repairs, if you look under 2018, that's a hefty chunk of money that we've already spent on that deal. And what it's going to be this year, I don't know.
And most of 19 for the LSL is incorporated within Main Street
Main
and
Street.
Mulberry
Oh,
Street.
very good, yes, thank you for making that point, you're right. Yeah, and so that's really what I had on the water budget, unless you've got other questions there. Okay, final one, the electric budget. Again, not a whole lot of excitement here. I'll just mention under page 246, the wages and salaries there. That's a little bit of a guess there also. We did have one retirement, and now we're working on filling that position. We don't know at this point if we're going to fill it with an apprentice or a lineman. Finding an actual journeyman lineman is proving to be very difficult, so that number could go down if we fill that position with an apprentice. The other thing that's happening there, two things that are happening. One is we did move one of our current journeymen up to take the place of the gentleman that retired. Gentleman's wife is in the room right now, so I have to be careful here. But and that's going to work out very well. But we also have, when we hire apprentices and we put them through the schooling, we actually set up a contract, a 3-year contract between them, us, and the Department of Workforce Development. And under that contract, we have to indicate what their wage will be, and the Department of Workforce Development has to approve that. And as they get more schooling, their wage goes up faster than it would if they were simply getting the regular raises. In other words, these guys will go up, you know, a couple $1,000s a year until they reach journeyman wage. And two reasons for that. One is they're gaining more experience, so they're becoming more valuable, but then we don't have such a huge change in wage from when they graduate as a lineman and they actually get a lineman's wage. So those two gentlemen are budgeted higher than the 1.5 increase that other people are getting, and so that's driving the increase in salary there. And then I'll go to page 248. Just a couple of notes here. The cost of purchase power, that's not a dramatic increase, $57,000 a year on a $5 million bill, and that's because WPPI is doing just an incredible job for us of holding the line there. They told us to budget, 2 to 3% increases in purchase power, and actually we just learned today that the cost of purchase power in 2018 is approximately the same as it was in 2012. And so their cost is going down ever so slightly. What will drive the cost of our purchase power is growth. So as we add new residents or new industries, that will increase the amount of power we have to purchase, and obviously then there's an offsetting income to the expense. And the only other comment I've got on this page, what we've done for this year and subsequent years is not change a lot under our meter reading expense. We do anticipate that will go down with the AMI system. We're not fully functional there, so we're not going to lower that cost too much in 2019, but we do anticipate those costs decreasing. Once we really get up and fully implemented with the AMI system, those costs will begin to go down dramatically. And then I guess just the last one I think I've got on here is, once again, the excavator shows up. Yeah. So that is really what I've got for all those budgets. And certainly any other questions or comments are welcome.
I have a question, and this again is on multiple utilities. An example is page 249 in electric. Capital expenditures, and there's computers.
Yes.
So I've noticed computers over and over again as a one-time next year.
Yeah, and I think this is citywide, Betsy. We're looking at replacing all the computers over a certain amount of time, upgrading them.
Right.
So
That's correct. There's an issue with I can't
Windows.
remember. Yeah, it's a Windows compatibility issue. So this year and next year, we're switching out our computers so that we can stay compatible.
Okay. So it's kind of the desk. There's a file server thing in there too, I think I saw. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's all.
Keeping up with the technology.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do we maintain the server in-house, or do we have someone else? run that.
We've got a combination, actually.
Yeah.
Dave, actually,
Dave,
by the way, does
okay.
a lot of that work, and then we've got an outside organization that helps us with some of the other, really, I think, Premium Computers, the outside organization, they take care of the servers, and I think Dave is really more of the desktops and the on-site computers and that sort of thing.
Lucky you don't have to call India.
Yes. Right. Uh-huh.
I didn't see a lot in 2018 under computers, so were the utilities mostly not this year, or?
There was a budget amendment for that. There were some computers
Oh,
out in the utility, but
okay.
it wasn't a great deal.
Yeah, all right,
Mhm.
Yeah, the bulk will be next year, without a doubt.
okay.
Yep. So my understanding then is that,
We have prepared motions.
yeah,
Where
It's
is
in, it's in item 8.
I think.
So there's a prepared motion for capital projects.
Yeah.
Yes, capital, and then there's another one for all the utilities together.
Yeah. So I'll make the motion to approve motion 18-10-1, recommendation of 2019 capital projects.
Second?
Discussion?
It's status quo, I guess. If you want cheaper rates, pick your project to drop, or...
No, we're doing the capital one, right? Is the
Yeah.
capital one with the GIS and generalist one? Or
No,
is
that
that,
was in the
operating.
utilities.
Yeah.
that's the utility one?
Yeah, and that would be utility general fund.
Alright.
Yep. So, yeah, I'll let you do your thing.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm listening. You don't have to stop.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, if you want to, when
We
you
can-
get to that one, if you want to, the
Amend
motion
it to have
indicate.
Paul look into the
Yeah.
GIS.
But that's
yeah.
the next motion.
Yeah,
Oh, okay, I'm with you.
that'd be the next motion.
So no more discussion?
Not in capital. The GIS is part of the
Yeah.
next motion.
So then, on this one, we do a roll call vote, right?
Yeah.
Every time, all right. Roll call, please.
Mr. Pickard?
Aye.
Mr. Lair?
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Mr. Temperley?
Aye.
Motion passed 4-0.
So then that brings us to the other one.
So you need a motion and then another motion to amend it to address the GIS? Is that preferred way? Or
Or
That
just-
would be effective, yes. If you make a motion on this, and then there'd be
a
a
motion
second
to amend it? All right.
correct.
So I'll make a motion to approve 18-10-2, recommend approval of the Public Works and Utilities budgets for 2019 to the City Council.
Second,
So then during the discussion part,
Correct.
then we,
or right now?
Yeah, so
So
How to-
what is the issue there?
Paul needs to look into whether the GIS is duplicated or carried over from previous. So I don't know how we can direct him, or if we just get a general agreement that he'll do that and just continue on, or,
Yeah, I just put like a review of positions, make sure the number of positions and the budgeting for positions
Yeah.
is
We're
correct.
not sure that we want to actually amend the motion. It's more investigatory. It
Yeah.
sounds.
yeah,
Contingent on or something
There
that,
you go. That'd be an appropriate way to do it.
all right.
just
So-
word that one.
Add contingency language regarding Paul's investigation of that specific position.
All right, so I want to amend my motion to add Paul's research in the positions.
As a contingency.
Yeah. You got that, Betsy?
I think so.
She's only got one
Contingent upon
hand,
Paul
so-
Herman's
Well-
investigation of the,
GIS position,
yes.
Or positions.
Yeah.
GIS/generalist.
yeah.
Yeah.
Make sure our numbers are right.
Yep. So then is there a second for that?
Second?
So that's the amendment.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Any further discussion? Then we do a roll call vote
On the amendment.
On the amendment.
on the amendment, please.
All right. Mr. Lair?
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Mr. Temperley?
Aye.
Mr. Pickard?
Aye.
Motion passed 4-0.
Okay, now, the motion as amended is
Yeah.
still on the table, or it's not on the table, it's
It's-
Yeah,
presented.
yep.
So then, any further discussion for the original motion?
No.
Nope.
Then a roll call on that, please.
Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Mr. Temperley?
Aye.
Mr. Pickard?
Aye.
Mr. Lair?
Aye.
Motion passed 4-0.
And then can we handle that with emails?
Oh, certainly.
Okay, so we'll research that and let you know what we find, how that
It's really
should be.
subject to administrative review, is what
Okay.
that ultimately comes down to. So, if there's a problem, administratively we'll solve it.
All right.
All right, that brings us to item number 9, recommendations for future agendas.
Are we gonna go over the poll results, or is that?
Go to the what?
The poll results for the compost, I love compost.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, thank you, yeah. They were going to be here this evening, but Betsy was out of, not this Betsy, but the other Betsy was out of town,
All right,
so we can put that on the agenda for next month. Again, certainly down the line, we're going to want to talk about funding LSL replacements.
I mean, last time we were looking at some of the DNR issues too, but we kind of talked about them a little bit.
Oh, I had another one and I can't think of it.
The council next week is discussing Sandy Beach, so that might be kind of coming to the top.
How does Sandy Beach relate to us?
Well, there's public infrastructure that ultimately will be done, and there are issues in the budget planning for the rebuild.
Okay. Are you thinking of TID 7?
That went through the joint review board, and it's advancing.
TID 7.
I think maybe not for next month, but future months, the updates on the DNR studies that we're doing on radium and corrosion control, where we're at. Probably that probably wouldn't be a bad thing to have, every couple of months on the agenda to get updates as we go through that process. This is terrible. There was one other thing as we were going through this, and now I can't think of it, but maybe that's for the better.
And if we're good there,
So there's no actions on yard waste by the city in the last month or in the future months?
Well, no action in the past months other than Betsy and Dustin putting together a little more solid information, and I think coming up for a plan for what to do in 2019. As far as, I think one of the things we talked about was exploring a site, that sort of thing. So
Right.
there may not be a lot of action, but a lot of results. And then as we get into next year, I anticipate there will be some
Okay.
actions to take.
All right.
all right. So if that's all that, then 7:58, meeting adjourned.